Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and we're here today for another weekly meta breakdown. This video is for the standard format. If you're looking for historic, it will be another video. We're going to take a pause on alchemy meta for the time being. Just there's not a lot of games being played, so there's not the best sample population. It just doesn't seem that popular, even just from the views on the videos. But what we try to do with this weekly look is take a look at the top performing decks, both on the arena ladder, and if there's a good showing of tournaments, we also will look at the tournament results as well. And the way we're doing this is for Arena Ladder, we're using the information that's provided to us from Untapped.gg. It's a companion tool that runs alongside the Arena client, tracks your win rates, card collections, suggests you decks, and then aggregates all this data into a great meta share kind of stats to show what's working, what's not each week. And if you want to use it, it's free to get started with that. Link is in the video description, so you can follow that link, install it, and it's good to go. And you can start tracking your win rates and get deck ideas. But today we're going to be looking at starting off with standard best of one, platinum to mythic rank for the week of February 20th to 27th, 200,000 game sample size that we're going to be looking at today. And we'll jump into it. So with the first deck, the highest win rate deck is the Selesnya Enchantments deck. So there's a couple variations of these enchantment decks. There's the green-white Hallowed Haunting deck. There's the Nia Showdown Ruins deck, and there seems to be this version as well. That's still using Runeforge, but none of the red runes. So the combination of Runeforge Champion and Jukai Naturalist means your new runes are basically free to cast. So it's 0 mana, get some sort of buff or lifelink or trample, and draw a card. So kind of a cool way to just spam those and kind of storm off. This version here is looking to buff creatures with both Generous Visitor as well as Kami of Transience. And then you have like Catilda and Spirited Companion to kind of wrap it up. You have removal in Circle of Confinement as well as Borrowed Time. And then you have like tokens with Wedding Announcement. Mashiko buffs your squad, and then you also have a Restoration of Eiganjo. So this particular version, and I've kind of found playing standard a lot, these like enchantment decks, especially if you get a big lifelinker out against like the red-based aggro, sometimes mono white, or just the aggro-based decks, you kind of just get stonewalled, and it's hard to race when they're gaining 5-10 life a turn. To kind of outpace them. If you're looking for the actual deck list, just as a quick reminder, I usually post a handful of them, the top performing ones, in text format in the video description, so you could copy them into Arena as well. Next deck is a deck that we've seen on the periphery for quite some time. Nothing really new with this deck. It's the Nia Humans Deck. So it's basically a mono white aggro deck that's leveraging like Minsk, some copies of Helena and Elena, and then Sigarda. So it's just buff up the squad, hit hard, mono white aggro. Sometimes you'll see Snakeskin Veil in it. This one's just playing some Valorous Stance. Then we're getting to mono white aggro, and this is pretty close to the list that I was playing that I got like to Mythic with. It went 17 and 5. I was up one more Wandering Emperor, so 3 copies. I was down 1 Thalia, and instead of the Stance, I was playing Fateful Absence, but relatively similar. Again, just a very lean to the ground, smash hard type deck. The question did come up a couple times, like what's the point of Brutal Cathar over Skyclave Apparition? Cathar has text in the control matchups. It also can exile tokens, which is relevant at times. There's a lot of ways to make tokens in these types of decks. It also will, like when it flips against control, it has text like that, and then it's harder to kill. They're taking some damage, and depending on how you play it with this deck, you can actually flip back and forth a couple times. So I've had games where this has been removal for 2 or 3 creatures in a go. Next up is Azorious Control. Kind of a blue-white flash deck. So we're seeing 4 copies of Wandering Emperor. It's a removal, it's a threat, all in one. Then you got a learn package with Symbology. 1 copy of Cemetery Protector, just another flash threat. So whenever you So enters the battlefield, exile a card from a graveyard. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell that shares a card type, you get to create. So kind of an engine, especially if you can like exile a land. All your land drops make 1/1s, which is pretty sweet. You got some Hullbreaker Horrors as just kind of the go-to control finisher. Sweepers, you got 4 of the Doom Scars. No Farewells in this list. Some of the lists are starting to play Farewell just because there's a lot of artifacts and enchantments in the format, so a good way to hit that. Sunset Reveille is a pretty good tempo card versus the aggro decks, just gaining you life, giving you blockers. Then you have Removal Suite of Fading Hope and Fateful Absence, card advantage. In Deluge, you got some counter spells scattered in there as well. So then we have our first instance of Mono Green Stompy. So really the kind of addition that we're seeing here is Kadama of the West Tree. So modified creatures you control have Trample. And then whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage, you search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield. So modified could be a 1/1 counter, could be equipment, anything like that. And really with this deck, you're modifying with either the Inscriptions or Rangers class. So this makes like your Wolf bigger, with the Trample, Old Growth Troll, thins out your deck. So kind of a cool inclusion in this deck here. Base stats aren't terrible. The big thing I found with this is because it can only search for basic lands, you're somewhat limited in terms of putting this in a 2 or 3 color deck. Well, I played a Gruul Modify list the other day and it didn't have this card in there because between all the dual lands, utility lands, creature lands, I only had, I think, 6 basics. So once you kind of get going, you're only going to be maybe hitting 1 or 2 lands, which might make it worth it. I think the Trample could be relevant more than anything. But a cool card here. I think in Alchemy, where you have like Voracious Pup, could be another good card with that. We see Boros Artifacts. This is a deck I will have a video up very shortly. Have it filmed and ready to go. This deck is actually really fun, but basically you're using Ingenious Smith and Patchwork Automaton. They both get bigger when you cast artifact spells. So you have like Reinforced Ronin that you can keep recasting every turn. The Battery gives you haste. Iron Apprentice kind of moves a counter over, but really what you're trying to do is just get a big creature, Angel Fire Ignition it, or give it Maul the Skyclaves to get it out of range. You have Showdown to refill your hand. You have 8 removal spells at 1 mana, which is good rate. It was a really fun deck. I really enjoyed it. I'll have the video up. We did a standard event run because it was the end of the month and I was trying to camp on my rank, but we went 7 wins with it. And like even games where we were racing, once you get I had a game where I just cast 4 Angel Fire Ignitions and we were going back and forth just racing and I just outpaced them with the life gain, which was pretty funny. We see Mono Black Control, pretty much your go-to standard list. Your Blood on the Snow deck with Lulth and Professor Onyx. One thing that like I've been playing in Mono Black, slightly different build, but the Invoke cycle, 5 mana Invoke Despair, makes them force, they either sack an enchantment, creature, planeswalker. If they don't on any of those, you draw a card and they lose 2 life. Another really good card, it hits like Lulth, the creature, any of the planeswalkers that kind of hang around. It's a clean answer to the Wanderer, so a lot of these planeswalkers will leave a token behind, like even like Sorin if you look, right? Sorin comes down, it minuses. You can kill Sorin usually, you can kill the token usually, but you usually can't kill both. Invoke Despair does that, plus refill your hand. So something to keep an eye on. This list seems a little bit dated. There's the new removal spell. This one here, March of the Wretched Sorrow. That seems a lot better. I'm playing one of those. The life gain has been relevant. There's the new Channel Land. In black, 4 mana, return creature or planeswalker to your hand. Another good card. You're already having stuff go to the graveyard. Rebuying a Lulth, rebuying a Sorin, something like that seems pretty good. Speaking of control, we have Esper Control. So pretty much a blue-white control deck. We see like similar inclusions. You have the Wandering Emperor, Hullbreaker Horror, Sunset, Doomscar. We also see some copies of Farewell in here. You have March of the Otherworldly Light as a way to exile artifact creatures or enchantments. Another way to gain some life with March of Sorrow. Really the black is like for the March. You have your Vanishing versus Catch-All Removal. and then a copy of Kato Suzuki for kind of card advantage, pressure, stuff like that. So kind of interesting ways with these planeswalkers where, you know, this comes in instant speed, this comes in and phases out. So you usually have a turn when you cast your planeswalkers to untap and be able to protect it, which is kind of cool. One cool thing about Untapped, you can see, like, for example, with this deck here, if I want to play it, I'm missing 3 rare wild cards. So I have to craft 3 of these. So it kind of gives you an idea of what to play, what you can't play based on the number of wild cards you have. Another version of Nia Humans, which we covered. Interesting deck, Mono Blue Tempo. This is one of those decks where if you're on the play, it can be really devastating. And when you're on the draw, it might not be as good. But really what you're trying to do is play a threat on one, so like Ascendant Spirit, Delver Secrets, and then just kind of playing the flash game. You have Fading Hope as bounce, March of the Swirling Mist as kind of a tempo phase out of opponent creatures. You have Spell Pierce, Essence Capture, Jawari, Geist Snare as all counter spells. Thirst Discovery is pretty good because if you're behind, you can check your counter spells. If you're ahead, you can like get rid of stuff based on what you need. And then it's got Spectral Adversary to phase things out, along with Dream Shackle Geist as a way to kind of tap down your opponent's threats. No creature lands in this one, which is kind of interesting. I'd probably, at the very least, just play 1 Hall. Seems relatively low cost. Well, although 7 mana, if you're going 1 for 1, just having a creature land seems good. We see a mono red aggro deck. So kind of a modify sub-theme. We have the Rabbit Batteries as well as Ogre Headhelm, both as ways to kind of get incremental value, haste, card advantage. You have your Bloodthirsty Adversary with the flashback package of Ingenious Inspiration, Play with Fire, Spikefield Hazard. And then you have Stormseeker, a Tushi, as well as Volatile Arsonist on the top end, and some copies of Chandra for card advantage, paired with the Kumano Faces of Coxlin. This card's been actually really good and nice in these aggro decks. What you're seeing in best of 3 and we'll cover is so most of the mono white decks are splashing Boros now, and they're basically playing this in the main board, and then some copies of Showdown in the side. This is just a really good utility card. Even if you look at it like Lulth comes down, it can deal that 1 point of damage to Lulth. It can buff up your creatures, use some utility there. One thing in here, this mana base, just throw in a channel line in all your decks if you have them. It's pretty much a free card. Like at worst, it's just basically a basic land. No pain, comes in untapped. Worst case, late game, you're flooding. You get 2 1/1s. You know, you get to return something. There's just really like cheap, easy ways in these monocolor decks. Orzhov midrange, kind of the shells. It's the black-white midrange deck. We've seen this a couple weeks in a row, so we'll kind of skip over that. Mono red goblins somehow wins games. I don't know how. This is, if you're looking for a budget deck, this is only 4 rares. I tried playing it once for a video and got absolutely demolished that I stopped recording because it wasn't even like close to like a learning experience. It was just like I'm playing a draft deck in a constructed format. We see another version of the Enchantments deck, like I was mentioning. This version's got the Weaver of Harmony to double your ETB effects. So if you have like an exile effect, you can double it, your double tokens, double Saiga triggers, and then you're playing Hallowed Haunting as a way to make you a bunch of tokens. Also seeing this kind of make its way into Historic as well. With Jukai Naturalist, a lot of them are playing 2 copies of this as a way to kind of close out the game a little bit faster. We see a version of Izzet Control, pretty stock, literally no new cards, not even the channel land. Your Lair, Goldspan, Hallbreaker, you know, tempo you out, try to kill you, Goldspan, smash you. No extra turns, but pretty much the same deal. See a Rakdos Sacrifice, and we've seen a couple of variations of this deck. This is a Anvil, only called to Anvil deck, basically sacking artifacts. You make a lot of blood tokens and treasures with this deck. You sack those for value, you kind of get your Drainsies on. This version is actually kind of cool. You're playing Burn Down the House, which can be both a sweeper, but also make you tokens to ping with. You also have Selesnya Uprising to make you tokens and kind of alt 13 damage. The Experimental Synthesizers card advantage in the deck. Some of these are playing Lulth. You're getting some other cards in there as well. Then you got like Reckoner's Bargaining and Deadly Dispute for card advantage. Just another copy of Mono White Aggro, some Orzhov Control. These decks that have been around for like a lot, I'm just going to kind of skim over them. Like there's nothing new here. This version of Mono White, you have a copy of the Wandering Emperor, some copies of Restoration of Eiganjo, but we want to look at like the new cards. So this is what I was saying with the mono block. You're getting the copies of Invoke Despair in the deck. Really useful card there. A little lower on the Planeswalkers, but overall kind of this card has really impressed me when I've played it. Got Selesnya Humans, nothing new with this deck. Orzhov Control, Orzhov Tokens. How many flavors of Orzhov can we play? Azorious Control we've kind of highlighted, but fairly similar to those other decks. This one's got a couple copies of Restoration in there. Mono Red Modify Aggro, so you got some copies of Thundering Raiju. Speaking of which, it's up on my YouTube already, but we played a Gruul Modify that did well at a tournament this weekend. Like this, the Oran Reef Ooze on 3, into this, and you just make counters with Rangers class. It was actually really sick. There was another one we took to the standard ladder, got 7 wins with that. If you want to check out that list, it's in the standards playlist. I was really impressed with that deck. Is it Dragons? The Hinata, not doing as well in best of 3, but sorry, best of 1. It's putting up results in best of 3 though. Basically with Hinata out, your Magma Opus can cost as little as 2 mana. Now we're kind of in the dumpster class. We got like Rakdos Equipment Modified Mid-Range. That just kind of seems a bit slow probably for best of 1. You don't want to be the slower aggro deck and not be the bigger one as well. Like Mono White goes both bigger and faster. Like while you do have Blood Vial Purveyor, it's pretty easy by that point to have interaction for it. But kind of interesting if you could Purveyor Double Strike, sounds kind of magical, Christmassy landing, cool. Esper Control, where they typed Planeswalker in, clicked one of each, built a deck like that. Some more Mono Red Aggro. Now we're kind of into the lower end. Storm Vehicles with Greasefang. We got some Clerics, some Artifacts, Selesnya Landfall. This was actually a deck Chris Botello was playing in best of 3, got up to like top 50 Mythic. Seems to be okay in best of 1, but kind of see the lower range of things. So this is actually the deck list. I had a pretty good time with it. It's showing only 48%, but like the kind of cool thing. So Oran Reef doubles your counters, so you can stack your triggers where Raiju puts a counter on something, then Oran Reef adds counters to everything that has counters. And then you also have Shatter Skull Charger, where in this deck it's really easy to put counters on it. So it's a 3 mana 5/4 haste a lot of times. This card was actually really good as well, just like at times being 2 mana 5/3 or bigger. What I didn't like about the deck, the top end, Chariot and Goldspan both felt clunky. I would probably go more 1-drops, play the 4th copy of Kami's Flare, switch this to Stormseeker and kind of build it like that. But overall I was quite impressed with the deck. You got your like ninjas, mill, kind of the lower end of things, but you can get an idea here. So jumping to best of 3, we have Mono White Aggro. So this is actually a really interesting build, and this is one that kind of came up a lot this weekend, and we can also see the Boros version below from the tournaments over the weekend. So it's a Mono White Aggro deck, 4 of Wandering Emperor main. You still have your Thalias, basically no removal main board other than some Valorous Stance, which is situational removal, and the down tick on the Wandering Emperor. You have your Legion Angel to fetch. This version's on 3 Crawling Barons, 3 Cave of the Frost Dragons, so just heavy creature line presence along with the Eiganjo. Close to 70% win rate for the deck. Sideboard wise, you got your Valorous Stance, more copies of Legion Angel, Skyclave, so like 7 exile-based removals versus sweeper decks. You have Guardian of Faith, and then you have March of the Otherworldly. So this deck's actually kind of a standout one, along with the Boros Modify. So very similar in kind of the main board configurations, but you have Rabbit Battery to give all your creatures haste, basically, as well as the Kumano Faces Coxswain, another utility card, and then some copies of Showdown for the grindier matchups. Redain, you got some exile-based removal in the side as well. Naya Aggro, which we see kind of in best of one, but this version's got Wandering Emperor, a copy of Ao the Dawn Sky, as well as some Snakeskin Veils. Kind of get an idea what's going on there. The Nia Ruins deck, so this one is kind of turbo runes, like I mentioned. Jukai and Runeforge Champion means your runes cost 0. You have 12 of them in this deck, or 10. They all cycle, so you can give haste, stuff like that. With the Generous Visitor or Kami, you can get really big creatures with trample, try to kill your opponent on the spot. So that's another version there. See some variations. See the Esper midrange, so kind of the evolution of the black-white midrange for best of 3. In the main board, you get Kato Suzuki. There's a lot of cheap creatures that can attack in here, so you can get some like card advantage every turn, starting on turn 3. You have like Wandering Emperor, so some good planeswalkers. Eye Twitch lets you learn. Companion recycles itself, and then you have Malvin Hermit as kind of a counterspell creature all in one. Main board, you're also playing a Disdainful Stroke. Good removal backed up, and then just kind of utility spells along the way. Mono Red Agro, kind of a modified aggro list, which is kind of cool. 58% on this one here. You got the Lizard's Blades, you got a Goro, you got your Ogre Head Helm. I played briefly with this. Like, I love Mono Red Aggro. I felt largely it's been outclassed by Mono White in Standard. Your threats are all just like individually worse. Like, you have very little spells that, if left unchecked, starting on turn 2 or 3, that just run away with the game. If you look at like Luminarch Aspirant or Adeline, they just win the game if you don't interact with them. They just get your creatures bigger. You have a lot harder time in this deck to make bigger creatures. You can get under decks like Control probably faster, but like I really like Chandra, but I've not been like overtly impressed. Another Esper mid-range list. You see Jeskai Hinata. So interesting that they're playing the Elite Spellbinder in the main, just another creature to kind of disrupt your opponent. You have Esper Control, just another kind of like heavy removal into Planeswalkers. I believe Elliot Dragon popularized this one last week. Another Hinata deck. Is it Control? Do we got new cards? We got one new card. The two. Apologies. 2 new cards. They completely changed the archetype, folks. Kind of get the feel for there. There is one deck I do want to highlight, the Jeskai combo. So this is a deck that's doing really well in tournaments, but is hard to play. So likely will have a lower win rate. So you're basically with Goldspan Dragon casting a bunch of spells with Treasure. You have like Galvanic Iteration to copy spells. You can target it in ways. And then what you're trying to do is build up a storm count, and then with the copies of Show of Confidence, put a bunch of counters on your Goldspan Dragon. So you're kind of rebuying stuff like that. You have Shijiri's Shelter for protection, and kind of just go from there. So every time you target your Goldspan, it basically generates 2 mana. So you can kind of chain things together like that. So speaking of like tournaments, we had a couple this week, and this is MTG Melee. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's where a lot of the online tournaments, pretty much all of them, even Wizards hosts through here. So we had a couple big ones like the Neon Championship Qualifier. So a lot of the like set championship qualifiers, MIQs, are played through here. So this one's still in progress, but you can see like 148 folks, 98, like the Kuroki's tournament last week had 600 and so. But if we look at like, as an example, this one was 137 folks played. You got a couple different decks here that have shown up. This is the combo version. You can see what their win rates are. You can see what the decks are. You can import it to Arena. You can also see like win rates at the bottom. So like Esper midrange was the most represented decks, 50% win rate. The best winning deck for decent gameplay size, Orzhov Control and Azorious Control, so you kind of get a feel for that. Lower quantities, only 3 decks, but like Mono Green Aggro and the Nia Humans had a really good show. Teamer Treasures, but like here you're only at 7 games, 2 decks, so I wouldn't look at that necessarily. But if you want ideas of like some good performing decks, I'd look for clustering at the top, see what type of archetypes overall did well. When there's a small sample size, like you could have one person win a tournament and one person go 0-3, it could have a distorted win rate, but it gives you an idea there. So I'll link this page. You can take a look at the deck list and kind of get a feel for that. You can also look at other formats as well. So anyways, that wraps up Standard for the week. As always, if you do enjoy this content, if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you next week. As always, if you have any cool decks, stuff like that, drop it in the comments for others to share. Stuff that's working well for you for the ladder. I just closed out my run with Jeskai Fires for Historic. I was doing some mono black Invoke Despair, so I finished with Jeskai Fires 9-2. There's a video on this if you want to check out the new version of this. They've unbanned Fires of Invention in Historic. Sorry, the sun is like glaring. I'm glowing. I was playing some Invoke Despair. I was actually pretty decent win rate, then got mana screwed a couple games. Like what I do. Went like 6-3, and so it's just kind of up and down, up and then win one, lose one, win one, lose one. So not the best showing, but you can kind of see it here. This is again just showing all the stats, stuff with tracks, stuff like that. So hoping to sit around the 500s mythics where I am right now and try to qualify for the next MIQ. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.